All right. Welcome, everybody, to episode 5 of Live with Kenny and Renny. A little sneak peek of what you're going to see later in the show here today is Harnrayan Singh is going to join us along with Eric Francis. But first, joining me, of course, as he always is my guy, Kenny Wiebe. How you doing today, Kenny?
Excellent, Sean. Thank you. How about yourself? We've got a fun week here so far.
Yeah, we've had a really fun week and some late nights. We were doing the post-game show, and I wanted to touch on this. We shut her down, and I think it was like 1:49 in the morning after that last Vancouver Canucks game. And you wanted to keep going, and the audience wanted to keep going. And I was like, this is ridiculous. It's been an hour. Let's get to the hour point. Let's shut it down. But now there's a part of me that is really, really regretting. Why didn't we go till 2 a.m? We could have shut the bar down, Ken. I can't believe you let me get out of that way.
Sometimes you got to be a good teammate. So I had expressed my opinion, but it's teamwork here, and also too, you knew I still had a column on Andrew Kopp to write, so that got filed at about 3:15 a.m. So just one of the really interesting and cool stories in hockey, and those are the ones that are fun to write. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and of course, you're talking about Andrew Kopp, and I mean that is the other thing is we do those things, and I'm thinking I'm gonna finish up with the show, and I'm gonna go flop into bed and zonk, and that's when your actual work really begins. So it's me who's usually trying to get out of there, and I'm thinking in the back of my head, I think sometimes I'm just saving you from yourself, Ken. To be honest with you. And I think it's necessary sometimes because you'll just go and go and go, and the audience knows it and they appreciate it, and so do I. So, you know what? You brought up your story on Andrew Kopp, so let's start there because we always love to get into the show before we greet and meet our guests. We always love to do a little bit of Jets chat before we get there, and what better place to start with than Andrew Kopp, who won someone in the Jets fan in the city $100,000 the other day by scoring it was his first hat trick, and then he puts it into a 4-goal game. And you'd ask him about the last time he scored 4 goals, and the answer wasn't easy to come by, was it, Ken?
No, it certainly wasn't. For a guy who's had to earn everything, his entire hockey career, just the genuine joy and enthusiasm on his face told that picture told the entire story. And he couldn't remember it. I mean, 3 years at Michigan, going from walk-on to team captain. He didn't have a 4-goal game there. He was pretty sure he didn't have one for the U.S. National Junior Development Team program. So, I mean, it would have been back to kind of, AAA hockey or minor hockey, and I'm not even sure that he would be able to pinpoint a night from there either. But regardless, it's just another great story. I mean, we've talked a lot on the program about players working their way up, how frustrating it can be out of the lineup. And we totally understand those are real emotions. But here's a guy who broke into the NHL as a 4th-line player, mostly because of his defensive consciousness and ability to be in the right position. And he's worked his way into a position where he's one of the more valuable forwards on a Winnipeg Jets team that is battling for first place in the North Division. He spent some time in the top 6 earlier this year and did a very good job there. He's been part of the top penalty killing unit for a long time. The other night, 2 more power play goals. I mean, he's on the second unit, doing a nice job in terms of the tipping in front of the net, getting to the net, getting to the hard areas. And he's also involved in in a really exciting line. I mean, we had a fun exchange the other day, and he doesn't consider it a checking line anymore, and you don't blame him. I mean, that line's been able to produce offense. I mean, he's already in double digits in goals. Mason Appleton's already set a career high, and Adam Lowry's rebounded nicely from that injury-plagued season last year. All 3 of those guys are really contributing.
Well, you bring up something exactly what I want to talk about. Here's the clip that that you're referencing right now about Andrew Kopp essentially saying we're not just a checking line anymore.
I mean, I guess I don't really consider us a checking line anymore. I mean, I think before we were very defensive oriented, but now I mean, if you look at the guys we have on the line and the guys that or the production that we've had, I think we don't really look at ourselves that way. So. I mean, we're looking to, obviously we're going to be responsible. We're not going to change our game by any means, but we're definitely going to play the right way in the D zone. And then, like I said, as soon as we get, the play style, we're looking to attack. We're looking to get pucks to the net. Our offensive game looks a lot different than maybe especially our second line with, their speed and open ice, dynamic playmaking, our offense is going to look a little different for sure. But when we're in the offensive zone, we're looking to score. We're looking to get pucks to the net. We're not looking to, especially when we have the puck, we're not looking to, make too safe of plays just because, who's coming back the other way. Especially on the road, teams are trying to avoid putting certain guys against us. So if we're getting third line match, we're not going out there to shut down their third line. We're going out there to score.
You know what I love about that line is the playing safe part of it, because I think that has a lot to do with being a defensive group, is that you're playing safe. The first thing you're thinking is about not getting scored on. And what I hear when I hear that is that's not how that line thinks anymore. It's not we're not getting scored on. It's confidence that we're not going to get scored on. And so much of that confidence that they feel that they can start focusing in the other direction now.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be perfectly clear, I certainly was not suggesting being part of a checking line was a bad thing. I mean, it's one of the most important jobs out there, and no one's denying the offensive production those guys have had either. But you're right; it's been a shift in mentality to a certain degree. When you're asked to play against the other team's best, sometimes you need to focus on trying to make sure you minimize the damage inflicted by the opponent. But right now, those guys have been able to. The other thing we know, Sean, no matter what level you play at, if you play against offensive players, a lot of times those players don't have a lot of interest in doing the checking part. So
that's right.
When you're out against those guys, you can generate offense and not just create scoring chances, but that ability to put the puck in the net. And that's a really important thing. But I do agree. I think the mentality for that line has changed somewhat. But the other part, one of the things that's always made Lowry and Kopp effective, no matter who's been on that line, is their ability to create and generate so much offensive zone time. So yes, they're responsible in their own end when they don't have it, but when they do have it, they're making you work because they're having these extended shifts and really forcing you to play defense against them. But yeah, I really do think that the other part of the answer that I love, Sean, is the end. And it's something that's come up recently when Paul Maurice talked about matchups. If you're going third line on third line in air quotes, it's a tough matchup for a lot of teams.
Yeah.
Never mind the matchup against the opposition's top line. If it's a third line versus third line, the Lowry line has a distinct advantage, and they've been able to exploit that advantage on a lot of occasions this year.
Yeah, what a luxury for Paul Maurice, because at one time that Lowry line was used to really shut down the Anze Kopitar type of lines and then try and just simply neutralize those lines or maybe minimize the damage they do and then hope that your big lines could do the damage on the other end. But now you've got a situation where the third line is the mismatch. If you match third line to third line, it's the mismatch, and that's how that's been going, and it's worked very well for the Jets at many points this year. I want to get into this. Okay, go on.
Just the last one again, because of the wording and because of the way that Kopp responded to my last question. We also know that a lot of time that's the Jets' second line over the board. So the whole numbering thing, that's something that the media probably does more than the coaching staff. We know that they're a very, very valuable line, and they have been for a long time.
I've got no problem with the question that you asked and the suggestion that they're the third line. And I know it's funny because there were some jokes and he was acting almost like he was offended. But I mean, the idea of it is take a look at the guys that are ahead of him. The traditional construction of a roster is the top six are your skilled guys. And I'm not saying those guys aren't skilled, but there's an offensive element to the players that you would consider above them in the lineup that those guys should not be able to touch. And they are touching it. So that's why he has the right to say we don't think of ourselves as a third line anymore. But it's also why you ask that question, because this has been their traditional role. And the thing that I find fascinating, Ken, is how often do we talk about a player who arrives, a team trades for a player and they show up at 24 and people are saying, what could this guy be? And it's like, well, they are what they are at this stage. By this point in a hockey player's career, they're supposed to have defined what they are. And yes, we figure sometime into the late 20s is a player's peak, but you don't expect to see this grand change in what players are capable of. And that's what I found fascinating about Andrew Kopp and Adam Lowry this year, for good measure, is that they have essentially become what I don't think many people ever thought that they were capable of becoming. We knew that they could be shut down, grind it guys. I don't think anyone expected this offensive element out of them. And I think it leads to the next question, which is where our viewers want to take this. I like this from John Vanook. Good morning, boys. My feeling is Copper is gone when it comes to that he controls his own path. He seems salty at arbitration, and I don't blame him. Okay, so I'm not saying that he's gone. I'm not agreeing with this here, and I don't think that you do either. But we do know that arbitration was salty for him, and he said as much, that he was unhappy with it. What does a new Andrew Kopp contract look like, and what does arbitration and his history with this team, what he's been paid by the team in the past, how does that play a role into what we can expect from these two sides going forward and trying to strike a deal?
Sure. What it means is that Andrew Kopp is someone who genuinely cares about the process, and he doubled down on that by getting involved heavily in the return to play committee. So this is a guy that cares about the fortune of his own career. He's taking the time to be invested in it, and he's also, cares about the direction the game is going. So I think that's an incredibly good thing. He's an, very insightful, educated, smart guy. I like that he got involved in the process. It means he knows he knows that there are some negatives to going to arbitration, but it was something he wanted to experience. So, of course, I think there might have been some level of disappointment there, and it's natural to feel that way. But I also think that because of what I had just said, Andrew Kopp understands that's the business element of hockey. Does he want to max out on his next deal? Of course, you can't blame him for that either. But I also think one of the important things, Sean, we talk about this a lot, and there is always that balance between, wanting to max out versus knowing what your role can be, and knowing your situation, and knowing that you have the trust of a coaching staff, and knowing where you fit in on a group. I mean, it's always a natural tendency to say the grass could be greener somewhere else. But I also think that Andrew Kopp is a part of this core group, and he believes in the direction this team is going. What does that mean in a negotiation? Man, it's going to be absolutely fascinating to me, and especially going into this year, he has arbitration rights again. He's 1 year away from unrestricted free agency. Can these two teams find some middle ground on a longer-term deal, especially with a flat cap? I think they can, but I think you're also going to have to pay for the projection of Kopp, and I think that he wants to continue to have an important role. He's going to want to raise, and he is deserving of one, but what that number is going to be delicate because of the flat cap situation. So it all depends on what he wants and what the team is willing to give. I mean, and also the other part too, if you're Kopp and you've been involved in the negotiations, Sean, do you consider a shorter term deal, expecting that in 2 years or whatever, maybe the cap is going up? So normally a person in Kopp's situation would want to go on a 5-year term or longer, but maybe you want to go on a shorter term deal, bet on yourself again, and then cash in 2 years. But it's really going to be interesting. Absolutely. Both Kopp and Lowry negotiations are going to be absolutely fascinating to me. And both of them are deserving of a raise, but they're all both deserving of a raise in a scenario where the middle class player, for lack of a better term, in terms of finances, where are those dollars going? I mean, it's more relating to the high end guys are getting paid, and then there is some area in the middle, but these are guys that are also valuable to all teams. So when they get to UFA status, they're going to be, in demand, for lack of a better term.
You touched on a couple of things there that I find really interesting. One, the projection of Kopp and what he's going to be in the upcoming deal that he's going to sign. I mean, if I'm his agent, Kurt Overhart, I'm rubbing my hands, because this is a player who's now opened up a Pandora's box in the way that who knows what he could become. He's still getting better. He's still evolving and in the right direction as a player. And the thing that makes me question when you bring up the idea of a 2-year deal is, don't you think that a 2-year deal essentially, I don't know. I don't know that I see him making that deal, because if he has arbitration rights and he can make it just 1 year, I think we expect after that the flat cap is starting to go up a little bit. And hasn't he bet on himself enough at this point? Hasn't Andrew Kopp putting the bet on myself contracts, hasn't he put those behind him at this stage?
He has, if the money's available, but we don't know if the money is going to be available. And the other part of it too is a player in Kopp's situation wants to feel valued. We know that when he was scratched for that game against Vegas, he took it personally and then came back an even stronger player. We know that he enjoys being around this group and being on this team, but for sure, you also want to feel valued. And let's face it, yes, role is an important part of that, but most players want to be shown the value also. And you can't blame Kopp for wanting to get a raise. He's deserving of one, and now it's a matter of, finding some middle ground or some ground both sides are comfortable in.
Someone had made a point here. Yeah, if Lowry stays and Perreault's salary is split between him and Kopp, is that going to be enough? It's an interesting question because basically where this team is going to get its money back, and we don't know, it's still a big question mark what's going to happen to Brian Little. Right. But I think we fully expect that Perreault is going to be gone. But man, what a goodbye he's giving to Jets fans if that's the case. And I guess the Stastny contract is the other one that comes up, and maybe. But I mean, is there enough money between what Stastny's contract and Perreault's contract? Is there enough in there to pay all three of those players and retain, Kopp, Lowry, and Stastny?
Well, and Neil Pionk is going to need a raise also, right? So
right,
there's that other element on that RFA side of the deal. So there's going to be not everyone's going to be allowed to be back for the Jets. I mean, I think that's just the flat out facts, but
I think you just broke some hearts there, my friend.
Well, I mean, it's possible. I mean, some guys could come back on a discount. I mean, we talked about that the other day as well, but sports often brings change. And I think that's something that, got to enjoy the ride when it's there and, let the chips fall afterward. I mean, we know that the Jets moved some pieces around in order to try to keep Paul Stastny after the 2018 run. And, they made some tough decisions, but it still wasn't possible. And the other part was that if Stastny had stayed, there would have been even more major surgery, probably involving Matthew Perreault and perhaps a couple other guys. So, I mean, it's going to be a very interesting offseason for all teams in the NHL, but the Jets have a lot of big decisions that they'll have to make, and they're going to do everything that they can to try to keep this group together, or certainly the majority of it.
Well, someone who's had a real good look at this group so far this season is our first guest, Harnarayan Singh, who I'm going to bring in right now. Harnarayan, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm doing well, and early this morning I was looking at my closet, and I'm an indecisive guy, and I'm like, which turban am I gonna wear? And so I see I've got an extra added element when I get ready. You guys you do the tie and the pocket square and the shirt. That's right. About it, right? I've got the turban, and so then I'm looking at it, and I'm like, this light blue, I never really wear this that often, and it's the exact light blue of that third jersey for the Winnipeg Jets, the one where it just says Jets across, right?
The Aviators,
right? Yeah. And so I was just like, okay, this is the one I'm gonna go with since we're talking to some Winnipeggers here.
Well, you're definitely the sharpest looking guest, and the turban is helping it because the last couple guys we have on, their hair is all over the place. It's kind of
I heard.
Thing, so yeah.
I heard.
Great to have you on. I guess first off, just give us you've been calling Jets games this year and doing a great job of it. We've enjoyed it. What do you see when you see the Winnipeg Jets team play?
I see a team that has scary depth, and I'm sure you guys have heard this a lot before. The top six everybody knows in terms of those wingers with Connor and Scheifele. You bring in Dubois, and you got Wheeler up there too, and I think the top six could rival any team in the NHL. But then if you look at that bottom six, and of course it's timely with Kopp scoring those that 4-goal game, and Ken Wiebe, I read all of your articles on sportsnet.ca, so it was a good one on him too, and some stuff I didn't really actually know about him that I learned. But that bottom six, it's scary depth. If I'm the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Edmonton Oilers, one of the biggest reasons why I'm trying to get to first place in the division is to avoid to have to play the Winnipeg Jets in the first round. Because if the Jets, and that's not to say that the Jets are not going to make top spot, but I mean the Leafs have been there for the majority of this season. But I just think that even though Winnipeg they haven't necessarily had an answer for Connor McDavid yet when they've played them in the regular season, the last couple of times especially. But I think that if you're Toronto or Edmonton, you look at that Winnipeg team, the Jets are built for the playoffs, and that depth that they have in the forward corps is really scary. I mean, let's see what happens now at the trade deadline, because obviously they could, potentially use some more depth on the on the defensive side of things, obviously with Bo Yu out, and Logan Stanley's been a great, a welcome addition, and kind of probably he's accelerated, where everybody thought he was going to be. And now with the 7-day quarantine, there's, maybe it opens the door for the Jets to pick up another defenseman on that side. But when I think about the Winnipeg Jets, that's what I think about: a complete team and a ton of scary depth that's built for the playoffs.
Thanks for reading, Harnrayan. Appreciate the kind words. We talk so much in the North Division about the offense, but for me, one of the X factors for the Jets is Conor Hellebuyck. What have you seen from him in the games this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's he'd love to continue to play the Vancouver Canucks, wouldn't he? Because he's got a good thing going against them, and it's one of those things that when he's dialed in, I don't, it's tough to find a better goaltender in the NHL. He's the reigning Vezina Trophy winner, and I just think the demeanor and his kind of the way his mindset, comes across as being very focused when you listen to him talk to the media. And I saw his body language there at the end when they scored that last goal. He could have had those 2 shutouts in a row, and you can tell it means a lot to him. And he downplayed it when he talked to the media too, saying that, well, it's about the team win. But you can tell he's the type of guy who would love to have that sort of thing, right? So I just think maybe earlier on in the season, he was kind of hit and miss, but he's coming on more. And I think as the games get more and more important, I don't think we're going to have to worry about him as much. And some of the Jets players address that too, saying he's the least of their worries on the team.
It's funny, Harnrayan, all of us Sportsnet insiders were supposed to pick the teams we thought that were going to do well this season. Kenny and I both covered the Jets, and I had them making the playoffs. I think Ken did as well.
Yep.
But Mark Spector is the only one across the country in Sportsnet that picked them to finish first. So it's funny. We talk about that scary depth, and you're right. And they lost Jack Roslovic and Patrick Laine, and still somehow remain the deepest. But I've argued they're the deepest team in Canada. And how did we sleep on a team that had so much depth that it could lose Patrick Laine and Jack Roslovic and remain that deep? It kind of goes to the idea of people sleeping on Winnipeg. And it brings me to my next point. I wanted to bring this up. You and I talked and met for the first time this year. You came in to do the first game, and we had a really mild winter in Winnipeg, but you came in at a time that was crazy, crazy cold. And I remember, reaching out and concerned you were in town, and I said, hey, it's pretty cold weather. And you'd said, oh, don't worry, I'm from Calgary. It's no big deal. And then this video surfaced the next day.
Oh, Harnarayan, you've aged on this trip.
I guess so.
It is cold out.
Holy smokes, it is.
I think my eyebrows look like your beard right now.
Yeah, Winnipeg. Can't even talk.
Hockey Day in Canada, baby.
Hey, this entrance is cool.
And that's when we just realized we had walked to the wrong entrance, because this season they just keep switching it up on us, right? And so we had walked like an extra round around the building, and it was my forehead was just like so frozen, and then I didn't realize my beard I've never had that happen. Like I'm like mid to late 30s here, and my beard has never been through that in a Canadian winter. So that was pretty epic, to say the least, and good on my color commentator Jason York to pick that up, and somehow he even got it to air. He got a picture to air that night too. So a memorable moment for Hockey Day in Canada. And of course I said Winnipeg.
Yeah, you touched on something that every broadcast journalist who's ever worked at Winnipeg Winter before, a lot of them coming from all over the country, you've touched on something that they figure out when you get here. It gets so cold in Winnipeg that your lips freeze, and it affects the way you talk. And I can tell you, I never would have realized it, but when you're on broadcast television and you're going live, I used to cover news before this, it gets so cold that your lips, it's hard to enunciate, and you'll go live and you kind of like it almost sounds like you've tipped back a couple and you're slurring your way through it. But I just thought that was really funny, because there's a part of Winnipeggers that I remember when you said that, I was like, not that cold, eh? Okay, we'll see. And then sure enough, that video popped up. But it was that was a lot of fun. That was really good. I'm interested in your preparation for calls and specific players, because everyone remembers your Bonino call, which just has become a part of hockey lore. Before that happened, did you know that if Bonino had scored or done something big, did you know you were going to do that, or were you saving that for a specific time? What kind of preparation goes into making a call that becomes legendary?
In terms of those, none at all. That was just a blessing in disguise that fell out of the sky for me. And I had the good fortune of writing a book called One Game at a Time. It came out last fall. And in that, I detail kind of the history of that. And basically, the Coles Notes version is I wrote down Bonino for left wing, center, and right wing in my pregame prep. And literally, it's just a brain fart mistake that I didn't notice. And just a couple of minutes before going to air, my colleagues and my producers, they saw my kind of sheets and they're like, "Oh, look at that. Like, it's hilarious. It says Bonino. And little did we know that, it was 2016 Stanley Cup playoffs, no Canadian teams, and we had no idea what to expect as an industry, as a channel. We thought it was going to be doomsday, but for Hockey Night Punjabi, it was like the best year ever, and we couldn't have predicted that. And it was all because of this goal, and it wasn't even just one. There's actually 3 Bonino calls. The first one happened against Washington, and he had a ton. Nick Bonino, who I've gotten to know now, and his wife's from St. Albert, Alberta, and we've bonded. Our kids are the same age and everything, and he scores this huge goal. He had series clinchers, game winners, overtime winners, and he scores and the adrenaline's pumping, and we have a very enthusiastic kind of loose style of call on Hockey Night Punjabi, and that's what came out when he scored. It was like Bonino was in my head, but it came out times 10. And I did my signature call at the end where I hold out the last note of a name, and there you go. All of a sudden is just, we had a cult following in Pittsburgh. We're called to the Stanley Cup final championship parade with 400,000 people, and myself and my colleagues are there, and just an incredible experience. And I remember Mike Sullivan shaking my hand, the coach, saying that, he's like, "Your goal calls were a part of our Stanley Cup run." And I'm just like dumbfounded, like, how is it possible? So it was just incredible. And what an experience. Unforgettable, to say the least.
I was a Pittsburgh Penguins fan growing up. Harnrayan and Mario Lemieux was my favorite player. I mean,
nice.
When I was a kid, I had a great little exchange with Badger Bob Johnson, and Mario was wearing the Penguins jersey. I was, I think 13 or 14, and I remember that forever. I mean, I understand you also had a moment with Mario Lemieux. What was that like to go through? I know you were a Gretzky guy growing up, but what was that like to go through?
Yeah, I mean, Mario Lemieux is the magnificent one, and, such a legend and so talented. And obviously growing up watching him during his era with the Penguins. And then when we were in Pittsburgh in 2016, and, we're standing there and we're in a hallway right in front of the Penguins dressing room. We're about to go in to surprise the Penguins players with the Bonino call. They were getting ready for their Stanley Cup picture. And so all of a sudden we see this authoritative figure from down the hallway, and he's super tall, but then he's got like an entourage of security with him, right? And we're like, who's that? And as he's coming closer, we're like, oh my goodness, that's Mario Lemieux, right? And so we kind of stand at attention, like, like Her Majesty's like coming her way or something like that, right? And we're just like by the wall and like ready to just kind of nod and let him go through. And he stops right in front of us, and he's like, who did the Bonino call? And I kind of put up my hand, and he first goes in for a handshake, and then with the handshake he pulls me in for a hug, and he goes, "You're a part of Pittsburgh Penguins history. You're a part of our family forever." And I was just blown away. Like, here I am, this kid from Brooks, Alberta, small town, and I'm getting to hug Mario Lemieux, and he's telling me I'm a part of the team. Like, it was just incredible, an unbelievable moment.
So you have an unbelievable moment with what I think is the second greatest hockey player of all time, but it's, in my belief, Wayne Gretzky's the first, and he's the guy who brings you into the game. And I was reading up, and you touch on this stuff in your book, One Game at a Time, but the idea of coming into hockey when there's no one that looks like you and you're trying to find a place for yourself. I'm wondering, retroactively after you've met Mario, but Wayne Gretzky, the figure that really drew you into the game, was there something about him as a player, other than the fact that he was great, that made the game feel accessible to you, that made you feel welcomed in just who he was as a person or how he approached the game?
What a great question, Sean. And it there is, and I've, it's not something I talk about every day, but my family, I mean, faith and culture and being proud of our heritage was a big deal for us, even in a small town of Brooks, Alberta, where there wasn't any diversity. And so I was always trying to find that balance at school with my classmates, being very different, looking so different with a turban, eating vegetarian food. And we had the biggest meat packing plant in North America at that time in Brooks. And we listened to different music. We spoke Punjabi at home. So you're trying to find common ground. And one of the things we were learning from our scriptures and our faith was being a humble person and, giving up your ego and how to serve your community and society. And, one of the things I really loved about Gretzky is not only was he the greatest player of that time or ever, but the way he carried himself, he was always giving credit to his teammates. He was so respectful, always talking about his parents. And then whenever he was breaking records, he was always talking. The first person he would mention is Gordie Howe, right? And I just loved how he carried himself. He wasn't one of those players who was so good and walked around as this cocky guy who was just like, I'm all that, right? He was so respectful to everybody. He always gave everyone so much time and respect and just genuine and down to earth. And I saw those qualities and I'm like, wow, I'm learning this at home. And like he exemplifies that. So it kind of even attracted me to him more than just, being the best player on the ice. It was how he carried himself off the ice. And that just fueled that obsession and passion even further.
Yeah, anyone who grew up in Manitoba watching and had the pleasure to watch Wayne Gretzky, I mean, what a treat. I mean, as a teenager, I loved watching those 80s Oilers teams. I know they broke a lot of hearts in terms of Jets fans.
Boy, did they ever.
But man, I mean, what a person to look up to. And I mean, he's continued to be that way throughout his whole career. I mean, what do you remember about watching him?
Oh my goodness. Just how he and this has been said before, but how he had eyes in the back of his head, right? How he could find other players and set them up in a way that nobody else could. And just how unselfish he was. Like there's so many times where, he had an opportunity for a goal, but he would pass the puck. There were so many times where, he was just the key moments in his career. And I just like, even if you remember, he was with LA and he broke some of those big records with Gordie Howe. And the first thing he says when they stop playing, he's got the mic. And then all of a sudden he's thanking Pat Quinn and the Vancouver Canucks for allowing them to do this ceremony. And I even watched that now again over some of those classic ones that they've been airing. Right. And it's just like, time and time again, this guy's so unselfish and it's incredible. So I just really, I remember those moments. And it's just at that time during his era, people used to say he couldn't skate or whatever. The way he was able to find room, that iconic slap shot that he had too. And yeah, just unselfishness. I just admire all of that skill. And he was kind of a genius at the game in the way how he could figure out what was going to happen before anyone else could.
I love your take on hockey and how it made you at one point of your life and probably ever since has done that, made you feel like part of a group. There's those certain areas that if people do two things the same, it brings them into a group. You're a percussionist. I am as well. But you play the tabla, and this made me really interested because you call the game, and I'm such an admirer of your call. But because you're a percussionist, maybe I'm giving credit where it's not due, but I'm wondering, how much do you believe the rhythm that you learn from being a percussionist and playing the tabla, how does that relate to how you call a game?
Well, I'm going to show you a little picture here if I can. That's me in front of a hockey net on the Saddle Dome ice here in Calgary playing the tabla, and
I'll do one better here. Here you go. There's a good shot of it right there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's on the back of my book, and music has been a really, really big part of my life. I play those East Indian percussion drums that you called the tabla. And yeah, I also sing. I also play this instrument called the harmonium and a couple of others as well. And Jeff Merrick kind of put it into words when I asked him to give me a quote for the book, and he said Harnarayan sings the game, and that really, it's such a nice play on my last name too, but it also actually made me think, and I realized that music actually has a big part of my call. And I even had Jack Michaels, the Oilers a play-by-play voice right now for Sportsnet, and he came up and asked me a question. He's like, you must have some sort of vocal training, right? And I was like, wow, it's interesting that people are picking up on this. So Sean, good on you for picking that up too, and we'll have to jam someday soon. But yeah, music, when you're a musician, it kind of bleeds into everything you do in life, right? Like you could pick up on stuff where you're just, even as you're, I'm sure you do this too, then if you're prepping, you got to have a good tune on while you're kind of writing your notes and doing all that, right? So it just plays a big factor. And that's one of the reasons I've been doing a lot of road trips, going between Calgary and Edmonton a lot, and then flying to Winnipeg. But you always have to have a good tune on and a good beat as you go. That's why I love traveling too, is you get to focus in on the music, and I just helps me concentrate. It helps me meditate. It helps me in so many ways. I find there's a piece of music out there for any sort of mood or emotion that you have in life. And I just love music. And I think it's music and sports are both things that can unite people. And so here we are, united by the sport of hockey, talking together, but we're also here having a great chat about music too. So it really proves the point well.
You touched on your book, Harnrayan. What was the most enjoyable part of the process? And as an author, what was it like to launch a book during a pandemic? And how do you think that has impacted the response at all?
Yeah, well, the pandemic part sucks because we weren't able to do any sort of book signing or any sort of proper launch or anything, right? And everything about it was here sitting in front of the laptop. So that part sucked, but the actual part about writing a book was absolutely amazing, especially for my family. My great-grandfather came to Canada over 100 years ago to be able to share that story. My parents came in the 60s to a small town in southern Alberta, and there, how they began to love that town, but all of the challenges and the strange things they experienced, right? Just imagine their first Halloween and not even knowing what it is. And they're both teachers and trying to figure that out and navigate it. And so to be able to incorporate all of that family story, and then how the passion for hockey began, and then all of the struggles to get to where I am today in terms of paying for my own flights when I actually got my foot in the door and all that. And then, yeah, it was just incredible to be able to put that all on paper. And I'm kind of one of those guys who likes writing myself anyhow. And so it was a great experience, and I can foresee more books on the horizon in the future because I had such a great experience putting this one together.
Harnrayan, I love hearing you talk about how the game is inclusive and brings you together. But, with the Hockey Diversity Alliance and the show that we saw in the playoffs last year, we're clearly not there yet. Maybe this is too big a question, but I wanted to ask you, what is it you think about the game that brings us together, and what parts of the game are still keeping us apart?
Yeah, it's unfortunately societal issues that bleed into our sport, right? And so, but we are in a place where we have a platform to try to spread positivity and try to change the narrative and that perspective from people who aren't compassionate or people who have hatred towards other in their speech and in the way they think. And I think that's why we have to take a stand. It's important. I mean, in the playoffs, I was really fortunate to be doing what you do, Sean, in the hosting side. All of a sudden I'm in Edmonton for like a month and a half. And, when all of that happened, where we were in the world because of George Floyd's murder in the States, and then the discussion of racism, when we talked about it, and I received a lot of feedback from people on social media too, that, we're not watching hockey to talk about this or to have to listen to this. Just, shut up and talk. I'm just watching hockey for hockey. And and I had to, and I remember a moment when the players decided to postpone some of the games, and I ended up having a one-on-one with Ron McLean. And I just spoke from the heart, saying that, this is important. It's important for so many people out there. So I don't care if you want to just talk about hockey. Right now, the hockey world is talking about this, so you're going to have to listen to it too. And it's all about respect, right? And I've experienced, blunt racial slurs in my life, countless times, unfortunately. But a lot of those times were unfortunately in a hockey arena. I mean, growing up, when my family and I, friends and I, or my siblings and I, when we would go to NHL games, like that's where I was called terrorist, Taliban, all sorts of crazy things, raghead, towel head, and having beer thrown on us and stuff like that. And that's whether we were in our seats or in the concourse or walking to and from our car or on transit. And so it's heartbreaking for me that, the game that I love and that I wanted to always be a part of. There's moments within that game where it was, experiences I wish I could have forgotten, but I didn't. And so I think we just have to work harder to try to change that narrative, to say to people that just because somebody looks different doesn't mean that you can disrespect them. In fact, I'm just as Canadian, if not more Canadian, than the person who's telling me to go back to where I came from. Because when I learned that my great-grandfather came here over 100 years ago, he had to go back to India because it wasn't a welcoming place in 1907. But that was something in my back pocket that I could say that, hey, listen, I'm Canadian just like you are, so shut it, right? And so it's like I find that myself, even this season, getting to do games in English play-by-play on the mainstream level, I'm proud of Sportsnet because it puts someone like myself in a position to be able to say to someone else out there who's like, this guy shouldn't be a part of hockey. Well, sorry, I am Canadian. I love this country. I love this sport. And so I'm going to be a part of it, whether you like it or not. And so you better accept it. And hopefully they find something out of me that they enjoy, that, that helps them change that perspective in their mind.
You talked about that interview with Ron McLean. I remember that was great impromptu programming. You did a great job there, and you talked about being proud of sports. And I mean, I had nothing to do with that. I was sitting at home on the couch watching it, but man, did I feel proud to be working for Sportsnet at that time when they tackled those issues head on the way they did that day. I just thought it was really, really well done. You touched about your grandfather being here. So essentially your kids are the fourth generation from your family on Canadian soil. One thing I find is fascinating, because I've got a lot of friends who come from immigrant families and their grandparents or their parents would speak a different language. And it always seems that at some point that language gets lost. Or you'll hear the same story about how their parents or grandparents speak it at home and they can understand the language being spoken, but they can't speak it themselves. Your kids, I believe, speak Punjabi, do they not?
Yeah, and that was my great grandfather who came in 1907.
Great grandfather.
And so these technically, these could be the third generation that have to do with. Well, actually, that would mean me. I would be the third of that generation that has anything to do with Canada, and then my kids. Yeah, so
right.
They are bilingual, and it's fascinating because. They play a lot of hockey. They're huge hockey fans. And whenever they're playing, my daughter's 5, my son's 3. And whenever they're playing mini sticks or outside on the drive or in the basement or wherever, which is almost all day long, they are always calling the game as they're playing, right? Because it's just natural to them because they see me doing it. And then now what's so cool to see is they call the game in a mix of Punjabi and English, which is also fascinating to me, because when I was growing up, that was one of the things that I was told, is that I wouldn't have a place in the hockey world because no one looked like me on sports TV, especially in the world of hockey back in those days in the 80s and 90s, right? It just didn't exist. And so when I see my kids, I realize that, this is why representation is so important, because I had that. So I was told that constantly, that this would be impossible. I didn't have representation. I didn't have anybody to look up to on TV or radio to be like, oh, there's someone from my community, so I would have a shot. But now my kids and that generation are being able to see it because of Hockey Night Punjabi, because of seeing women, because of seeing people of color covering sports. It's like it plants this seed for them that, hey, it's possible, and they won't have to, it won't be a barrier for them anymore, right? So it's, and you guys will appreciate this as broadcasters. Like, my kids are doing everything, and it's full circle because they're doing the intermission interviews, they're doing the opening thing, like, welcome to, Rogers Place or MTS Place, wherever it is, and they're doing all that. They have a toy microphone just like I did when I was a kid, and so they emulate all of it, and it's really cool to see them just doing that on their own naturally and in 2 different hockey languages.
I absolutely love that, Harnrayan. And for me, I mean, Sean doesn't even know this. I wanted to be a play-by-play guy too growing up. My dad worked in radio at Golden West Radio. When I was a very young kid, I had the opportunity to meet Danny Galvin. My dad's boss, Elmer Hildebrandt, brought him, to one of those sportsmen's dinners that were so prevalent, in the 80s. And I was, I would call the game. I would turn the sound off and call the game on TV too. And I even had an opportunity to do it for the Allen Cup, the Regina team, when I was going to university there. But I remember
amazing
in Grunthal. Sean is familiar with Grunthal during the playdown with Manitoba and Saskatchewan. Like, I'm in this corner, like, calling this through this chicken wire. You can barely see the ice, but I got these crazy notes. I'm just curious, who's your favorite play-by-play guy growing up, and do you have an experience of one of those things when you were calling games before you made it to this level that really sticks out from your younger years?
It's a great question, Ken. In Calgary, in Southern Alberta, we were getting a lot of Flames games. And when I was growing up, Ed Whalen was this legendary play-by-play guy. And he started every single game with this iconic kind of the wording that he had. And it was like, "Hello, hockey fans." And it was just, that's the way he was going to start every game. And I talk about an experience meeting him in my book as a 4 or 5 year old, and my family and I were in Calgary at the mall or some sort of department store, and I recognized him from a long ways away. And as the story goes, I ran towards him, and my parents were, my family, my sister, my parents were trying to catch up, and so I go up to him, and I knew right away that he was the guy. And at that time, though, because I was from a small town and I didn't have an example of other children from my faith and what they did with their turbans. And so we, from the Sikh faith, we keep our hair long and unshort. So my hair is actually down to my lower back, and then it's tied in a bun at the top of my head. And on top of that goes the turban. But at that time, so I was just wearing my hair out, and there's a little cloth on it, almost like what you would call a bonnet. And so Ed Whalen, not, unbeknownst to him, nothing against him, but when my family caught up and we were talking hockey and I was so excited, he referred to me as a she. And for me as a young boy, growing up with hockey, it really all of a sudden showed me, and I'm kind of going off on a tangent here because we were talking play-by-play, but I ended up thinking of this story. But for me, it really forced me to really quickly think about my identity in the greater world, that people don't necessarily understand this whole concept of us looking different. And so from that day forward, I decided that I'm not gonna go out of my house with anything other than a full-on formal turban. And there's a graduation of turbans in life. You don't come out as a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old wearing like this formal sized turban. But in the town of Brooks, my dad was the only person wearing a turban. And so I was like, I'm wearing that no matter what. And so I skipped all these stages of smaller, different styles of turbans because I was worried no one else was going to understand. And I would be, there would be a misconception. It's kind of ironic that that happened. I talk about that in the book, but in terms of going back to your original question, sorry for taking too much time, but so Ed Whalen was somebody I heard when I was growing up, and I loved his kind of energy. But obviously Bob Cole in Canada is a legend in terms of, he was calling the Stanley Cup final for so many years and the playoffs, those big moments when I was growing up. And then, as I've grown into a broadcaster, I've got a ton of respect for Chris Cuthbert, and I grew closer to him, and we bonded during that Edmonton bubble too. And he was so gracious with his time, and I just learned so much from watching him closely and getting to, have a coffee and just learning about how he preps and everything like that. So I've got to give a shout out to Chris Cuthbert, as he's a legend in the industry nowadays too, it's great to be able to get to know him more and more as time goes on.
Well, Harnrayan, I love hearing about your kids following your footsteps. Ken, I love hearing about you following in your dad's footsteps. It's last question. It's a really quick one. How's your calculus? Because your dad was a high school calculus teacher. How did you do following in his footsteps?
Horrible in that department. And his one-liner to me was, well, you're not going to have to take the derivative of a hockey score. So thankfully, because of that, it was like a backhanded support, I guess, that I didn't have to take calculus. But, my math skills are not that great, but I can tell you what the score was in the game.
That's perfect. Harnarayan, it's been such a pleasure. We absolutely love having you. And I think you ingratiated yourself to Jets fans with the aviator blue turban. What a nice touch. We really appreciate that. Thanks so much. And we'd love to have you on again in the future if you can find the time. I know you're busy, but appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no, it was a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, guys. Good luck with this show. Loving it so far.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
And Ken, I'm just going to bring Eric Francis straight in here, straight away. The franchise is here. Really appreciate you finding the time. And we were just talking, I think you heard in the green room a little bit about, following in the footsteps of our parents. You come in as a journalist, the son of a legendary journalist, your mom, Diane Francis. What's it like trying to carve your way in an industry when such a wide path has been trailblazed for you?
I never saw that as an impediment or something I had to live up to. The way I look at it, she writes about important stuff and I write about I'm in the toy department, as we call it in the newspaper game. But so I'm obviously extremely proud of my mother. The one thing that I clearly learned from her is, she's not scared to say or write anything, and that's kind of how I built my entire career too. Criticism doesn't faze me whatsoever. The repercussions of some of the things I say, I can deal with them. I heard you guys telling those stories earlier about impactful moments, like with Ed Whalen and my mom had a moment. I think I was 14. I wanted to be a stockbroker. I thought I wanted to be a stockbroker. I wanted to be Gordon Gekko, and from Wall Street. And then one day my mom said to me, I read the sports pages every day, and she said, I said, I don't know, maybe I should be a sports writer. And she says, oh, you want to get paid to go to the hockey games? And that sentence had the most impactful. It just changed my whole life. From that moment on, from age 14, I knew what I wanted to do. It's crazy because we have these humble little goals of being a sports writer, but I managed to live out my dream of being a sports writer. And I think a large part of why is because I knew from a young age what I wanted to do. So everything I did from that point on was focused on that. The university I went to, Carleton, volunteering for the school paper, whatever I could do. And I always tell kids when I go to schools, if it's hard to know what you want to do in life. Some adults don't even know what they want to do in life. But if you do know at a young age, oh my God, are you a step up on everybody else?
Eric, sorry, Ken, I'm just going to get this out of the way. My dad was this really legendary phys ed teacher in this area that we were in. So I got out of high school and I went on to go try and become a phys ed teacher. And he was really well known across the province. So everywhere I went, it was like, oh, there's Chuck Reynolds' son, right? And so I was at the point where I was through one degree. I was just about to finish up my second. I was teaching in schools already as a student teacher. And I just really felt like I couldn't escape the shadow. And one of the things that always kind of bothered me about it was just his efficiency with the job, and watching him on the job. He was so good at it. I just would always compare myself to him and never really feel like I was ever going to be able to be at that level. And it's one of the reasons that contributed to me leaving the field. Did you ever struggle with that? I mean, having a parent who you saw in action and thought, like, when you actually started carrying out those actions in the job, thinking like, I'm nowhere near where she is.
No, I understand that, and I've heard that before from people, but I was never burdened with that. I saw it as a tremendous blessing to have a mentor who lived in my house, and who I could call anytime I wanted to. And, in a lot of ways, I learned so much from her by just osmosis. And I always laugh, I got a taste of what the life was like, and my kids' experiences too, like stuff like this. My son could walk in at any moment in time right now and ask me to fix his truck or something. Like when I was a kid, my mom was on with Peter Zosky on a daily basis on CBC, and that kind of helped me give her a national name. And this is the days when we didn't have cell phones; we just had home phones. So I'd often pick up the phone to call my buddy Craig and say, "Hey, we're playing road hockey in an hour," and my mom would be on national radio, and I'm on the phone. And you can hear me pick up the other line, and I'm dialing, doo 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 doo, and then the national audience is waiting for me to finish that, and then my wife would say, "Eric, I'm on the phone," and I realized right away what I've done. But the funniest one was one day the phone rang, and my sister and I were wrestling, and I pick up the phone. It's Christmas time. And big deep voice says, "Hello, is Diane there, please?" I said, "Yeah, okay, hold on a second. Mom, phone!" And then my sister and I continue to just wrestle, and she's screaming, and I'm yelling, and we're laughing, and my mom picks up the phone, and she's talking, and then all of a sudden she covers it up, and she says, "Would you guys shut up? It's the Prime Minister." It was Brian Mulrooney. It was Brian Mulrooney who called my mom to just say that he really enjoyed her first book. So that's when I kind of knew, oh my God, like she's really done well with her career. It's pretty cool.
That's tremendous. Eric, a lot of people don't know that you're from out east, but you've come to really love Calgary. I mean, what prompted the change and the opportunity you got there, and what's made you fall in love with the city?
I got it when I was going to university in Ottawa. I worked for 4 years as a copy boy, copy runner, jobs that don't even exist now in the newspaper, but just anything I could get my foot in the door while I worked for the school paper, and I took my journalism degree. So when I finished my 4 years, and I did a summer apprenticeship doing news in Ottawa at the Sun, but the Ottawa Sun wasn't hiring. They just didn't have enough money to hire anyone. And then my boss at the Ottawa Sun reached out to the publisher here. His name was Ken King, and said, "I've got this kid here, and he works hard." And I don't know if he said anything nice or not, but either way, I got a call from Ken King, and the first thing Ken said is, "Hey kid, I hear you hit a hell of a golf ball," because I'm a golfer. And I lived my whole life just playing as a junior and such. So Kenny knows we've been partners for years on the golf course. But anyway, so Ken King brought me out there for an interview. We didn't play golf, but I got the job and came to cover the Doug Flutie and the Stampeders, and I didn't know a lick about CFL. As you guys know, out east, way out east, CFL is a punchline. It still is in a lot of places. It's a punchline in Toronto. No one I knew ever went to a game. So I'd never been to a CFL game. Doubt I ever watched one other than the Grey Cup. And then here I was covering Doug Flutie and arguably the most important franchise in the league at that time. And from there, I just went to the NHL, and I knew when I first moved out west, I've been here 26 years now, I knew within 6 months I was never leaving. I had many opportunities to go back east. My family's back east. You would think that I would want to go be near my family. Sacrificed all that because I just love the West. I love the attitude, the people, and I love the city, so I wasn't leaving.
Eric, you mentioned you and Ken being golf partners. When you heard about him getting 2 hole-in-ones in one game and 3 in a calendar year, how much of you was appreciative and how much of you was jealous?
Well, I was so happy for him. I mean, because everybody who knows Kenny knows he's like the happiest and greatest guy in the world. So when good things happen to good people, of course you're happy. I've had the good fortune. I've had a couple hole-in-ones, but not in the same round. I mean, that's a whole other level. I don't know how many people on the planet. I don't know if you figured that out. How many people on the planet have 2 hole-in-ones on the same round? That's just mind-boggling. But no, I was thrilled, and he does like to mention it the odd time when not that often. He's a humble guy. To be fair, we bring it up, not him.
I always joke. I always tell the audience that as soon as we get off air, it's all he talks about, and he really doesn't. Like if it's ever brought up, it's me who's bringing it up. But it's you know what? You talked about your mom having this national name, and for me, and this national voice. For me, that really started with you with Satellite Hot Stove on Hockey Night in Canada, which was just, I mean, if you grew up watching Hockey Night in Canada, you parked yourself in front of the TV for Coach's Corner, and you parked yourself in front of the TV for Satellite Hot Stove because, there was no internet. This is where you got the insider information. How old were you when you started that, and how much of an accomplishment did that feel like at the time when you landed there?
I'm so glad you brought it up because it's like that was a dream come true. Like I remember being at my first Olympics and thinking, wow, this is one of those moments where you take it all in and you say, I've really made it. But being on Satellite Hot Stove, I mean, I'm actually reading the book by Al Strachan about it right now. And I doubt I mentioned in it. I'm near the end and I haven't seen my name, and that's fine because he was before my time. But it was 10 years ago that I was on there for 2 years, and I still remember the phone call from Brian Spears, the producer, and I was sure someone was punking me because I'd never heard of Brian Spears. I never in a million years. To say it was a dream come true is kind of not even accurate because I never dreamt that high. I was a writer. I'm just a writer. And all this TV stuff, even though I work for Sportsnet with you guys, that's not – I'm a writer. That's the way I see myself. I like to do all three, but Lord knows, I did a morning show for 13 years on radio. Who knew that was ever going to happen? But there was a time in my life 10 years ago I had 2 young kids, like infants. I was doing a morning show full-time. I was writing full-time for the Calgary Sun, and I was going every weekend to Toronto to do the Hot Stove. I look back at it, and I have no idea how I pulled it all off. I'll tell you how I did. I was mediocre at all the four gigs. Not great at any of them, just mediocre, but getting through all the parenthood, broadcasting, writing, all of it. So I loved it. What an honor to be on Hockey Night in Canada for 2 years, and I kind of joked that I was the one who was responsible for ending the Hot Stove. I was on the very last one they ever had. And then Gary Bettman shut it down. He didn't like us airing all the dirty laundry of the league on there. So they put a different version of it now. It's called Headlines, I guess. But it was more controversial back then. I worked with Mike Milbury, Pierre LeBrun. I mean, you guys saw it. And it's funny because most of my friends here right now, they have no idea I was ever on that show. We moved into a new neighborhood, got a whole new set of friends. And none of them, when I mention it every once in a while or every second day, they don't believe me.
We'll shift gears here. I love the insight you've been able to provide on the personal side, Eric. But I mean, a little bit of news, obviously, surrounding the Calgary Flames. What's going on there, and what was your reaction to the coaching change?
I like Jeff Ward, so I have a hard time saying I was in favor of the coaching change, but I can't argue with it. And I certainly think that given the situation Calgary's dealing with, Daryl Sutter was the perfect fit for them. Now, clearly, looking ahead 8 games later, the bloom's off the rose. But he has fixed a couple of things that this team was really struggling with. Work ethic and, just consistency. And now the question is, is the system that he's implemented, is it successful? Can it be successful with this group of guys? So at this point in time, it's a mess in Calgary right now, quite frankly. And, this 3-game set against Winnipeg, this could end Calgary's season effectively. And that's an amazing thing to say with 22 games left, but that's the hole they dug.
The playoff version of the Flames last year is one that made short work of the Jets, and yes, there were a couple key injuries on that Jets roster. But I mean, I thought they played a really good series against them, and then, they took 2 games off Dallas, and who we all know what they did after that, went to the Stanley Cup final. I thought looked pretty decent in doing it. How did they fall so quickly from that playoff version when they were supposed to be better? They added goaltending that was supposed to have fixed the problem. They added a phenomenal defenseman in Chris Tanev, who Ken and I marvel at when you see him play live. What went wrong with this team this year?
One of the things that they always thought was one of their advantages was they had a tight-knit room, and the guys really care for each other, and they feel like that bond was even strengthened in the bubble last year. But I got to be honest, I think it got to the point where they were almost too comfortable with one another, and it became a country club. And Jeff Ward wasn't able to kind of get the most out of these guys. I think they took for granted that the coach was I don't want to say an easy coach, but a guy who, was really open and listened to them. And anyway, at the end of the day, guys were way too comfortable. They would show up for one period, take another period off. Daryl Sutter's fixed that. Like they have not had a period off since he's been here. So what went wrong? It's the same cast and crew, even though they were augmented by a couple important parts, Chris Tanev and Markstrom, but the attitude didn't change until Sutter came, and it's too late by then.
Obviously Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau get a lot of the attention right now, Eric, but what about Matthew Tkachuk? How has he responded to the coaching change?
I got a column I think it's just coming live right now on Sportsnet Friday morning here, and his minutes are down by 5 minutes a game under Daryl Sutter. That is absolutely amazing. And what's almost as amazing is when I asked Daryl Sutter about it yesterday, the first thing he said was, "My bad. I've got to find a way to give him more minutes and use him better." And I don't know if I've ever heard Daryl Sutter basically say "my bad." I mean, but hey, maybe it's part of just having to adapt and be a kinder, gentler coach in today's world. So, you're going to see more of Tkachuk. But there was an incident earlier this year that's we can't quite get to the bottom of because of COVID. If we were in the room every day, I'm really sure I would be able to pull several people aside and say what really happened. But early this season, like 8 games in, there was a team meeting, and it was right after the Jake Muzzin puck flip in Tkachuk's face. I'm sure some people remember that. Yep. And he went bananas afterwards. And someone after that game, they had the team meeting a couple days later, and someone said to Tkachuk, allegedly, from what I understand, tone it down. Like, tone it down. You're a little over the top. And my take on that is whoever said it the GM needs to find out who said it, and whoever said it needs to be on the first plane out of Calgary. Because when you're telling the heart and soul of this team to take it down a notch, then that tells me a lot about the heart and soul of the player that said it. And to me, it's also a microcosm of what's going on in this city. Telling someone not to be as engaged and as emotional as he is, it's absolutely insane. So that sums up where this team is at, if you ask me.
Eric, I've got tons of respect for you as a journalist, the way you approach the job, the inside sources that you get, the way you work it, and the breadth of your career, all that you've done. You touched on it a little bit, but I wanted you to expand on being a sports journalist who's got those inside connections, covering sports in this COVID world, the difficulties that creates and the barriers it has created to doing your job to the best of your ability, and maybe an explanation of why things should go back to normal when this is all done.
Well, I think journalism just suffers. I think it sucks right now. I think there's a lot of bad journalism going on right now. It's because of Zoom. These players, hey, Sean, it's very interesting because you two guys know, like, if you can just sit down with a player, Kenny, and get something from him, that you get it at one level. But as soon as Sean shows up with his cameraman, you're going to get a reduced level of information.
Totally.
Right? Sean,
totally true.
You're totally right. Yeah.
And I've been, because I do both, I understand what it's like, and I'll often see Ryan Leslie coming over with his cameraman, Shaw, and I'm like, no, give me 2 more minutes. I'm about to get something good here, or I'm on a roll. Well, now none of it. Now we're all getting it even. If there's an A level that the writers get and a B level that the TV guys get, we're getting a D or E level through Zoom. These guys they know that everything's being recorded, everything's being shown on TV that night on Sportsnet. Like, they're so guarded. I have yet to see many good quotes from guys on Zoom. So the journalism sucks. Yeah, it's just hurt all of us, whether someone's an insider or not. And I hate that term. I don't believe I'm an insider. I believe I know this city and this team inside out. And I do believe I know lots of people around the league, but I don't like that term. Like, I'm no Elliot Friedman. I mean, there's a guy. Insiders to me are guys that work 24/7 talking to people around the league. My focal point is the West. My focal point is Calgary. Yeah, I guess I'm an insider in Calgary. But anyway, and by the way, thanks for your kind words, Sean. I appreciate that. and I think very highly of both you two guys. And I'm happy to see this podcast or webcast or whatever we call these. I saw the first one. I was there. I want to get a badge or something saying I was there for the start of some greatness. But thanks for having me on. That's awesome.
Oh, of course, Kenny. I just wanted to add to this point there. I know you want to get to something, but to your point, the idea of the camera coming in there, I entirely get that, and I understand that because for my Hockey Night in Canada stories, when I'm hosting, you want to have something that's original and fresh. So you got to get something that no one else has. And in this market, if you go and you do it in a scrum, when there was TSN radio here, it would be on the radio 15 minutes later, right? So if you go and elicit really good stuff from players, it's getting used. So to your point, working my job, I understand as much as anyone how much the camera kills the conversation. Essentially what I have to do at certain points is my camera guy Colin, I give him a boom mic and I let him kind of follow the crowd around. But if I need specific stuff, I'm leaving the camera. The TV guy is escaping the camera to go have those conversations. Because like you said, as soon as you take and you put a camera in someone's face and that light pops on, the exposure that player is going to give is just absolutely reduced by 75% right off the bat. Sorry, Ken, you go.
No, don't be sorry. We almost had our latest technical issue. With the addition of the ring light, I was down to 5%, and I had to get the extension cord plugged in so I could get the computer plugged in. So just another classic. We're going to have a Ken's microphone Twitter account started up soon, and now it was going to be Ken's battery is low, and it knocked him out of the program. So, no, I mean, you guys have touched on it. I mean, it's so hard to get fresh voices. I mean, you get the odd phone interview, and I mean, Eric knows this too. I mean, you're always looking for outside voices in our business because otherwise everybody else has the same thing. I mean, you had the great story on Matthew and Brady's mother, the Winnipegger, right, Chantel. So I mean, you got to try to be as creative as possible. Just going back to the Flames, I mean, Eric, do you feel like this group can somehow find a way to pull together and rally and still find a way to make the playoffs, or where do you see them going in this weekend series?
I believe that they could come back until they lost 2 in a row to the worst team in the division. But losing 2 in a row to Ottawa was the death knell to me. They're finished. I'm not an analytics guy. I'm not good at math at all. As a matter of fact, I joke that's why I got into journalism. You didn't need math, but they got to go 16-2 is what the common belief is around here. They got to go 16-2 down the stretch, and I see no sign to believe that they could do that. Now, had they swept Ottawa like every other team pretty much in the league does, then they would be 6-2 under Sutter, and I would have every belief that they could go on a run like that, especially since you're playing a lot of the teams that you've got to beat in the standings. But after 2 demoralizing losses like that, plus a third one in Toronto, no chance. No chance. And here's the saddest thing to me. The saddest thing to me is that the players left Ottawa, and after all 3 of their 3 straight losses, they all felt like they played really good games. When you play well, and I get it, in an 82-game schedule or 56-game, your best sometimes isn't good enough. That's going to happen. It's going to happen. You're going to come up against a hot goalie, some questionable calls, whatever, bad bounces. But when you went 3 games in a row and you said, we played well, we just got to stay the course. And that was the message yesterday from Daryl Sutter, stay the course, keep doing what we're doing. That to me says you're absolutely dead. If you're good enough is not good enough to score more than 1 goal against the worst team in the league, playing a brand new goalie who has a condition where his hands get numb when he gets nervous. Like, are you kidding me? That was the perfect storm for the Calgary Flames to win 2 games in a row, 7-0. Instead, they lost them both. Their season is over.
Yeah. Before you go, we got to get your take on the Jets and what you've seen from them so far this year. A lot of people surprised at where they are in the standings. What do you see from this team?
I'm not surprised. I said from the beginning of the season, I thought it was going to be Winnipeg, Toronto, and Calgary. So my Calgary prediction was wrong. But I love the Winnipeg Jets team. And I know I saw like a muted version of them last year in the playoffs up close because of the injuries, but I've long loved just how they're built. I love the leadership. I think the world of Wheeler. Scheifele is a superstar. I'm telling you things that you guys all know, but from an outsider's point of view, I know that everybody says that their defense is kind of their Achilles heel, but I kind of like, what they've done with it of late. I like Hellebuyck. I think I would not be surprised if the Winnipeg Jets won the North. And I'm not just talking about the playoffs. I'm talking about the regular season crown. I wouldn't be surprised at either. As a matter of fact, I put some money on it the other day. 5-1 it was paying for the Jets to win the North Division just the other day. And I was like, oh, I got to get me a piece of that. So I like the Jets. I think they're a great team. I think they're going to stomp. No, I was going to say I think they're going to stomp all over the Flames this weekend, but the Flames have been playing structured and well. I don't think there's going to be any blowouts, but the Jets will be the better team over this 3-game set.
Eric, great stuff as always. That's what we've come to expect from you, and it's what you deliver. And I gotta say that your humble nature, it belies the reputation that people like to bug you about in the industry. Everyone likes to try and make you sound like the franchise. But yeah, it's been great talking with you, and we appreciate that you've been watching since the beginning. We're ecstatic to have you on, and we hope that you'll join us in the future.
Hey, man, thanks for having me, guys. Good luck. Keep her going. And, hey, enjoy the game tonight. I'll see you on Zoom.
See you, Eric.
Appreciate it.
So you know what I think we learned here tonight or today, this morning, Ken, is we've got the thing that stands out to me is two guests who aren't very good at math. They both admitted to it. I don't know how that came out.
I certainly would be in that same class as my high school teachers at BC Miller Collegiate in Altona would confirm. But, doing our best to make the math add up with the writing.
Ken, let's finish with a little bit of Jets talk here. And I think there was a clip that we both wanted to play here. Blake Wheeler, when asked about, kind of the confidence and how it can be fleeting, he had a really good answer this week after the Edmonton series, but I think it was in between I believe it was post game after Monday. The first game against Vancouver. I just thought that this answer that he had says a lot about this team. And again, now they've lost 2 straight games, but really this team's ability to kind of bounce back and stay in it the way they have this season. Let's have a listen.
To my prior point, the more time you spend in the league, the more you learn that, what happened last game, what happened the last few games, it has no bearing on what's going to happen tonight, unless you let it. So, those things happened and you have to absorb them and try to learn from them. But, that has no bearing on the outcome of the game tonight or, what's going to happen tonight. And, the three of us have had enough success in this league that we can have a lot of confidence in ourselves individually, even though it's sometimes hard to resort to those things when you're a little bit shell-shocked like we were the last few games.
Ken, when we ask this team about their bounce back, 2 words keep coming up time and time again: belief and leadership. Clearly Blake Wheeler has both those traits. How much do you think it's him driving the bus for this team in that regard? And how much credit do you give him for this being a team that has the bounce back that they have?
Yep, they've got a great leadership group, and they've added some younger pieces to that core. But Blake Wheeler is the guy who leads the charge, I think, emotionally for sure, and by example. I mean, we talked going into the Monday game, Sean. I had every belief that the top line would bounce back. I mean, they had some solid moments. They had some tough times in that series against Edmonton, but Blake Wheeler talked about it right there. You have a reservoir that you dip into that well and know what kind of player you are. And, we saw it right from the first shift with Wheeler's pursuit of the puck. I think that line was excellent. But the other part too, we started the show talking about Andrew Kopp. Andrew Kopp was one of the guys who spoke after the Edmonton game. When I asked him about the ability to bounce back, he said, well, you got to make it your hardest working game and don't let it get to 3 losses. I mean, that was on full effect this week against Vancouver. I understand that, Vancouver is a depleted team, but as far as the Jets fan base, Sean, I mean, what do you want the Jets to do? That depleted Vancouver team had just gone 8-2-1. So I don't think you discount the quality and the nature of the victories because a team ran into a team that had been a little bit low on the gas tank because of how hard they had to play without Elias Pettersson. I mean, the biggest development for the Jets was Conor Hellebuyck. I mean, Conor Hellebuyck has been good this year. There's no doubt about that. He faces a ton of quality chances on a nightly basis. He was sick and tired of hearing about the narrative about allowing 3 or more in 8 consecutive games. And what did he do? He gave up 1 in 2 games, and in all likelihood, could have or should have posted consecutive shutouts based on how well that he played. There was just one breakdown late in that game. So, I mean, this is another big weekend for the Jets to get going in this two games against Calgary. Then they'll finish that season-long 7-game road trip on Monday. They do have an opportunity to create some distance and separation with the Flames team that is reeling and basically playing for their playoff lives. So I think it'll be a very interesting series. And again, I don't think we talked about that exhale the Jets probably had after the Toronto series in facing Montreal and then Edmonton. I don't think there's going to be any of that exhale at all when it comes to facing Calgary. They know what Calgary is going to bring, and they want to keep building as they get close to the stretch run here.
I'm with franchise. I think that this is kind of, I expect this to be where Calgary's season kind of comes to a clunk and an end here. The Jets, I think, are playing well. I think they've done a really good job this season of the teams in the rearview mirror, keeping them in the rearview mirror. And I think, for teams like Edmonton and Toronto, they'll be taking a look at what the Jets do here. And 1, I think the race for first is clearly back on. But 2, I think it puts those teams in a situation where they look at what happens after this. If the Jets do what I expect them to do this weekend, it's really going to be jockeying for playoff position. And I thought that was interesting that Harnrayan had said about the idea of you're racing to finish first because you don't want to play the Winnipeg Jets in the first round. And that's probably the best way of ensuring that you don't. I just got to say, absolutely, again, just blown away by the support that we get from our audience and the people showing up here. I wanted to end on this comment, which I showed earlier, but Winnipeg Chaser says A++ show today. Amazing conversations and great insight from both guests. I couldn't agree more. Got to thank both Eric Francis and Harnrayan Singh, who were phenomenal today. Our show keeps getting longer and longer because it's harder and harder, Ken, to stop the conversations because you don't, what's the rule? You don't stop a good conversation, right? And I mean, these shows are going to be 2 hours soon enough if they keep going in this direction. Really appreciate them. And Ken, you wanted to add?
Just one quick one. I mean, we know we had a lot of comments in the comment section about trades and stuff. That's something that we've talked a lot about on our pre and post game shows. So again, we're not ignoring your comments there, but we got on our Friday show, we're trying to have free flowing conversation which is mostly guest centered. So keep those questions coming. I don't think Ville Heinola for me remains an untouchable. So I don't see that him being included in any deal with Nashville. So let's just leave it at that, but we'll dive into those issues. We'll continue to do so tonight and on the post-game show as well.
Yeah, to Ken's point, we have a pre-game Instagram show that we like to put on. You can find that on Instagram, and our post-games are on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Best place to watch us is on YouTube. So if you've been watching this, make sure you haven't subscribed, make sure you go click and subscribe so you can follow us. And again, we love taking your questions. This show, we don't do it as much, but we'll take all your questions on the other shows that we can get to in the time that we have. And once again, just means the world to us that people are checking in and leaving comments and interacting with us. Please keep doing it. We absolutely love it. It's the favorite thing we've got going on at our work right now. So thank you so much for joining us. Hope to see you tonight at the pregame and hope to see you at the postgame afterwards. That's it for episode 5.